Welcome to worship in the Unitarian Universalist Church of Charlotte. We are here after a week of dreary rain, shimmering skies, bright blossoms, drifting petals, chilly nights, blustery afternoons, and even a few random flakes of snow. Then it all culminated in the cruelty of a temporal system that, in the preposterous name of saving daylight, reached down into the wee hours of this morning and senselessly, with full malice and much forethought, snatched an hour of sleep away from us. Happy Time Change Sunday. Welcome to visitors, to members, on this first light elongated day. Even if all we'll really want to do is go to bed early, welcome to the lengthening light of the evening. Welcome. Welcome to this particular Sunday.
We're good. We're good. Okay. Let me stay here. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Oh, we're just going to light the light right now. Chalice.
We hadn't rehearsed that part. Okay. Our first reading is from my friend and colleague, Unitarian Universalist minister, Jane Jebka. For as long as I can remember the days, as the days get longer, I get this funny feeling. I get the feeling the time's about to change. Moreover, I get the feeling that everyone else on the planet knows just when daylight saving time begins. You all have the secret formula. You learn some clever nursery rhyme that tells you when it happens. You all get a postcard in the mail from the office that is in charge of these important things, but not me. Then the bad dreams start, the ones where I blissfully in the dark miss the springtime change and arrive at church Sunday morning just in time for the coffee hour. Last year, I finally went to the library, investigated the Uniform Time Act, learned that the time always changes, tells you the date on this piece, learned that the time always changes the last Sunday in April, wrote the date on a piece of paper and put it in my top desk drawer where I see it every single day. It feels good to be solidly in the know, settled. But still, I have the funny feeling that the time's about to change. Didn't I hear that they're changing the changing? Can they do that? I don't ask for much. I know nothing stays the same these days. My uncle could marry a different aunt. My children could change their given names. My childhood home could become a parking lot. I could decide to become a donut maker or a roller derby queen. I half expect all of that. I just like a little something I could keep on a scrap of paper in my desk drawer. Something that I could count on.
a poem by Tracy K. Smith. We are here for what amounts to a few hours, a day at most. We feel around making sense of the terrain, our own new limbs, bumping up against a herd of bodies until one becomes home. Moments sweep past. The grass bends, then learns again to stand.
It was fall 1971. I was 11 years old. 57. You don't have to do the math. The White House was occupied by a wildly unpopular, particularly tricky man. Nixon had advised a political associate, if you can't lie, you'll never go anywhere. Then explained his own penchant for prevarication by asserting, I was not lying. I said things that later on seemed to be untrue. Who could have imagined that some might now actually pine for those earlier times when a comparatively stable president paused from ordering up bombings and break-ins long enough to sit around making recorded slurs with a later remorseful, recently beatified evangelist? At any rate, I had a console turntable in my bedroom. I'd sneak into my sister's room and borrow a massive cream-colored album, 4 full vinyl discs, 8 sides of songs, a recording of a sold-out week of concerts at Carnegie Hall by the band Chicago. This was pre-saccharine, pre-3-minute, 10-second pop Chicago. This was the Chicago of blaring horns, wailing guitars, and long songs with provocative lyrics. In fact, by the time I'd make my way to the final 8th side with a ringing sound in my ears, there was a raging ballad called Song for Richard and His Friends, which was introduced in the concert as kind of a wishful thought about wishing President Nixon would quit. Back on the front side of the first disc, the band opened with a 10-minute plus version of In the Country, transitioned to Fancy Colors, and then the magic started. Keyboardist Robert Lamb launched into a free-form piano solo that went on for quite some time before first the drums and then the full band joined as they finally broke into now familiar lyrics. As I was walking down the street one day, a man came up to me and asked me what the time was that was on my watch. And I said, "Does anybody really know what time it is? Does anybody really care? If so, I can't imagine why. We've all got time a Kindle." There was no such thing as Facebook or, thank God, Twitter. No one was wearing a Fitbit or flying their own drone. In that primeval wasteland, many of us numbered our friends in at most the scant dozens. The word like had like a whole other meaning. Stream meant basically the same thing as creek or brook. Character was a virtue, not something that was limited to 140. It was a grim, primitive, largely joyless existence. As I recall, most of us spent what little free time we had sitting in the sand grunting and drawing crude pictures with sticks. For all of my smirking, consider just how drastically different our world is for all of what has changed in the last decade and a half. And good luck if you are trying to guess what the next stretch of time will bring. Today, the time, it is a-changing. Every day, the times, they are a-changing. It is, ironically, the most predictable aspect of life. Young adult writer Jacqueline Woodson expresses it like this: time comes to us slowly, slowly. It sits beside us for a while, then long before we are ready, it moves on. Or, as Jimmy sang it in another of the favorite albums of my youth, castles made of sand slip into the sea eventually. Who of us here today does not understand, in some sense, both Jane Jebka's concern that she has gotten the time wrong and, more poignantly, her desire for, as she says, something I could count on. For all of our acclaim for the journey, for all of our affection For as we will sing again shortly, the sentiment that I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. Who wouldn't like a little something in life that doesn't change, that simply stays the same? Wouldn't we like to carve out some little piece of life where we could, in fact, carve something into stone, something we could count on not to change? Such is not the nature of life. Life is, as May Sarton named it, never still, flux and change. Life is, as Amy Clampett named it, a wheel. All that we know that we are made of is motion. To be sure, this congregation is changing because we are consciously trying to make changes. To be sure, we're following a new vision, investing in a less comfortable, less comforting journey. To be sure, we've set our sights not on mere tweaks, but on expansive, comprehensive transformation. But perhaps today is a good time to remember we were always going to change anyway. Things weren't ever going to stay the same because throughout the decades of our existence, they've never stayed the same. Right, Simone? They've never stayed the same. Our wishful thinking notwithstanding, there's never been any time when we've always done it this way. Buddhist Pema Chodron reminds us everything is in process. Everything, every tree, every blade of grass, all the insects, animals, human beings, buildings, the animate and the inanimate, is always changing moment to moment. And so it is for us too. Everything about us is in process. Our structure, our self-understanding, our ways of thinking, of singing, of worshiping, of educating, our language, the words that we use or the words that we don't use, all of that is always changing. And it has always been so. Does anybody really know what time it is? I do. Well, at least this much I know. Even as time is changing, it is time to change. Because no matter the times, they are always a-changing.
Welcome to today's service. We're honored to have guests with us. Our members would like to greet you following the service. So that we may do so, if you are visiting, please raise your hand and keep it up. Members, please take note of guests seated near you. After the service, invite them to join you for coffee and conversation in Freeman Hall. Should it enhance your experience of future services, you can find both a large print order of service and a personal hearing device on the table at the entrance to the sanctuary. If you'd like to learn more about us, please fill out a yellow card and place your completed card in the offering basket when it is passed later in the service. Members with a live event to share can do so on the reverse side of the card. You'll find them along with offering envelopes on the clipboards at the end of the row. Please begin passing them down your row now. Some returning visitors may be interested in learning about how to become a member. If so, talk with our membership coordinator, Kelly Green. Her contact information is on the back of your order of service. Again, to each of you, welcome. Changes. I've always said I like change. I embrace it. I love an adventure. Regardless of how we feel about it, we all deal with the time change in the spring and again in the fall. For some reason, this time change brings to my mind chasing lightning bugs on summer evenings, and I'm glad for the trigger to remember a simpler time. On the other hand, every spring, I struggled with the time change. Before I retired, I just slogged through that first week. My lone act of resistance was the refusal to change the time on my own watch. And impishly, I relished the thought of anyone asking me for the time and watching to see if they even noticed I was out of sync. However we feel about it, we all share the time change, but most of our changes are more individualized. After living 27 years in the same house, I have now had 4 different addresses in 2 years. I sold my house, moved to Raleigh to be closer to children and grandchildren, then saw my son and his family move to California. In the Raleigh area, I visited 3 Unitarian Universalist churches where I witnessed the interaction of people hugging their friends, asking about their children, and talking about their common ground, and marked my own outsiderness. I went to college in Raleigh, and I thought it would be like coming home, but the places I knew then were either not there or just not places I was interested in now. I longed to run into folks that I knew in the grocery store or coffee shop. I've never felt as lonely as I did in Raleigh. On my first visit to California a few months after my move, I shared with my daughter-in-law that where I really wanted to live was Charlotte. And she said to me, "Life is short. Live where you want to be. Others will understand or they'll get over it." Once I had uttered those words, I gave myself permission to really explore what it might be like. I had just moved and already wanted to move back. It all sounded so stupid, so carelessly thought out. I would be so embarrassed. Could I do that? I had to work really hard to let go of those thoughts, and as you can see, I did move back, and I have no regrets. I'm so very happy to be in your midst. I see my friends often and live in a multi-ethnic neighborhood where children play outside and adults like being in community. Moving from my home of 27 years was a huge undertaking, but moving back to Charlotte is one of the best changes I've ever made. I learned that my roots run so deep in Charlotte. It is where I belong. And yes, Dorothy, there's no place like home.
We're glad you're back. Even if you are late. And I'm glad you're here on time, miraculously. I greet not only you, but I'm going to venture a guess that our viewership on our live stream on a day when both the time changed and the weather is once again dreadful may be higher than usual. So welcome to those of you who are enjoying this service in your pajamas. We're glad you're with us as well. There are a lot of different ways to get involved in the life of this congregation, just a few of which you'll find in the back of your order. There's another dance on Friday evening of this week. On Saturday, there is an environmental justice or green sanctuary event. There are other ways for you to be involved here. We encourage you to take a look at those and find your way into the life of this congregation outside of this room. Everything we do as a congregation is due to the generosity of our pledging members. Thank you for supporting us. Please pledge as generously as you possibly can. We open our hearts always in our service to remember that there are those in need in the life of this congregation, in this community, in our nation and around the world. If today marks some special occasion of joy, of celebration, of remembrance for you, later on in the service, during the playing of the music, after the offering words, you're invited to come forward in silence and light a candle. I love this day. I love this particular day because now for the next more than a couple of months, I will get to remind my colleague John Herrick that he's older than I am. If we only had a pianist, we could sing to John on his birthday.
Time I thought I had it made.
invite us to a time of meditation and aspiration, the opportunity to breathe deeply together. O God of all people, for the gift of this moment, this hour, this day, we are grateful. For flirtatious hints of spring, for daffodils, pear and cherry and tulip tree and wisteria blossoms, for red buds and their shameless showiness, for the birds at sunrise returning or just passing through, for those nights when frogs again sound from nearby ponds, and yes, for light that lingers into the evening, we are indeed grateful. For the earth, forever turning, for those with whom we share this brief cosmic pirouette, our prayers of thanks. Today we celebrate agents of change, those who with intention invest themselves in efforts to make our world a better, more beautiful, more just and equitable place. For scientists, those workers of wonders in technology, medicine, engineering. For teachers of all kinds, those who devote their days and long nights to the essential act of leading out. For artists and musicians, writers and filmmakers, those who challenge, inspire, amaze. For therapists, counselors, social workers, those who are present to pain and who call forth possibility. For activists and organizers, protesters and provocateurs, those unwilling, unable to settle for the world as it is, and who challenge us to notice and to conspire. In the ever onward flow of our lives, we pause briefly to reflect. Today, ours is a prayer of thanks. Amen.
We come here in community because of your generosity. I thank you for that generosity. I hope you share my pleasure at that. This is now the time to ask our ushers to come forward and collect the offering and participate in the giving of our gifts.
am enthusiastic, utterly embracing of all of the change that I am enthusiastic and utterly embracing of. It's the other that's the challenge. As a white, straight, cisgendered, highly educated, economically comfortable man, it's not lost on me that talk, to joke about change is different. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for and made uncomfortable by those who cared enough to teach me that it is time to step back. To teach me to listen. To understand that not everyone sees the world the way I do, that not everyone has had the advantages I have, that not everyone enjoys the privilege I enjoy, and that because of that, their experience of the world is very, very different. It is time for us to change. Please be seated.